Hey everybody, I am Kevin Iole. I appreciate you joining me. I hope you are staying safe and well during this crazy time that we are living in. And as we're in a situation where there's no fights going on, we got to find something to do to talk about the fights. And so right now joining me is one of my friends, a guy who does a great job. You see his work in the LA Times, on BoxingScene. You've seen it all over the place. And if you're a really hardcore boxing fan and you watch Bash Boxing, you've seen his face too. My friend Manouk Akopyan. How are you, Manouk?
Kevin, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And you're having me a few days after Mike Tyson, so this is like a feather in my cap too.
So we got a heavyweight fighter and a heavyweight journalist. I aim to bring everybody in here. That's great.
You're too kind. And little do you know that right before I slept last night, I saw you on my TV. I was watching Legendary Nights, and Kevin Iole, young strapping Kevin Iole, then of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, was waxing poetic. I believe it was on Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield episode.
Yeah,
So
I managed to make my way into a few of those. The one that was funny. There's a fight's been released. It's on YouTube now. Is Gotti Mayweather, and they have the whole pay-per-view. And so I was in the countdown, and they actually did that in my house. And a lot of times, they film those shows, they've wanted to do it in my house. And anybody who really knows me, actually knows me, knows I have a bunch of dogs. I have Basset hounds. And so it's impossible to record in my house with those dogs barking. And so that Gotti thing, whoever did the sound was unbelievable, because the entire time we did the interview, dogs were barking, but nobody actually got a chance to hear that.
that's great. That's actually been one of my favorite things to do during this whole pandemic is go back and watch all these old fights and
Right.
watch the old broadcasts. And it's great when I see all my friends now years back that, I grew up watching and admiring their work from afar, and now I work alongside with them, and you being one of them, of course. So it's definitely a great to go down memory lane, but we're starting to itch for those fights a little bit now, aren't we?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I love watching the old fights, and I've always done that. When Top Rank did the deal with ESPN Plus and put their fight package on there, to me that was heaven. And the first thing I did on ESPN Plus was sit there and I looked for the oldest fights possible that I could watch, and was there anything I hadn't seen, and watch them. I just love doing it, but. Now, and hey, you saw, I did a story yesterday, the ratings for their classic block, they did that 11-hour block on Saturday, which ended with the Ali Frazier trilogy. They peaked at 835,000 viewers. That was incredible.
Yeah, it's better than some of the live fights boxing gets. So, if people are going to watch these old fights and really rethink why they've been not watching the sport today, it's a good move altogether. I just find it fascinating that these fights have been available on YouTube for years, and now
Right.
it's like it has to go to a TV screen for it to really get people thinking about it. So it still shows the power of TV, even though we're in a generation of cord cutting.
Right. I'll tell you what, I think we're not that long away where TV is going to be secondary to watching on computers. And I know people said that for years, but I think that, we're close to that. And the fact that you see ESPN and the Disney company really making such an effort, and the money that DAZN is spending, I think that's showing. And sports is going to be one bastion that's going to be, I think, primarily online before that much longer.
I can't tell you all the times that I've watched fights while I'm at the gym, on the elliptical, on my phone. I mean, the beauty of having everything mobile, it's great. How many times have we been handicapped and strapped to our living rooms or couches or
Right.
office when we've had to watch a fight remotely because we have to do it on linear TV? But, this is great. Sometimes when I need to be on the go, I'll have someone else drive while I'm there watching it on my tablet. Great.
Exactly. One of the things that I think, is going to be an interesting coming out of this is when we look at pay-per-view buys, right? Because before they would always say, okay, we sold 1 million pay-per-views, but there was 4 people in the place, or more people would have pay-per-view parties. But if everybody's watching it on their phone, or everybody is watching it, of course, I know you can stream it to your TV anyways, but I think more than likely now people are not, and they're going to just be picking up their phone or their iPad or their laptop, whatever it is, and watching it on their own device. And I think that may affect the overall numbers of what's going on, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think for that to really shine, boxing has to turn from our father's favorite sport or our grandfather's favorite sport to our favorite sport in this generation. So, within time it'll tell as everyone adapts to new technologies. But with this whole global pandemic now, the dollar is going to be even more crucial in how people decide to spend it. And who knows if they want to pay $80 to see another Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder fight. It's going to be a tough ask for some of these promoters to jump right back into the scene and command these types of money.
I think, here's my belief, and, maybe it's because I've been in boxing so long. I believe people like the product. I believe that they care about boxing, that they want to watch, but they want to watch good boxing. And they want to see, when they see a fight and two guys come up like Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, they don't want to wait 4 years, and they don't want to hear this BS about, well, he's on the other side of the street. They want to see the fight. And what's happened is Dana White and the UFC have broken down those barriers, and they've made those fights happen. And there's, as you know, there's very few fights that fans desperately wanted to see in MMA that have not been made. But that is not the case in boxing. And I think if boxing promoters could learn from this, and I think maybe they would get that young fan base back. They would find that a way to get that base back, because now these phones are what the young kids use, and even adults, not just young kids. But now if we give them what they want, you're going to make them fans again. But they became fans of the UFC because A, it's a great sport, but B, UFC makes the fights they want to see. They're responsive. So does Bellator. You see that kind of thing, the best fight the best. You agree with me, Manouk? Do you feel like if they made that change in boxing, and that when we came back, the fights we wanted to see, Wilder Fury, or the winner versus Joshua and Spence Crawford, and those kind of fights, if those were made, do you think we would see a difference in terms of the demographic of boxing getting younger?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason why a fighter in their athletic prime should not be in the top five. So why are we having a Terence Crawford and Spence conversation still at the ages of 32 and 30? Didn't we learn with Pacquiao Mayweather that the more you let these fights sit, the worse it gets for the sport? I love the fact that these fresh and upcoming fighters, these 135-pound fighters especially, who've been just like screaming from the mountaintop over the last few months, give me these big time fights, give it now. And I think with promoters now, they're going to have to really seize these windows a little bit better and not let it stretch out too much. So we might see these developmental windows actually shrink, and it might be beneficial to the sport, because promoters are not making money right now. So they need to really deliver value. And the value is going to be the fights we want to see, not against an up-and-coming contender just to see another showcase. So I hope, it'll be a race till the end of the year where promoters trying to outclass each other with one fight better than the other, and bargaining for people's dollar at that point. Because
100%.
You're going to have to choose which fight you find your value in. Is it going to be a Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, or is it going to be a Lomachenko Lopez fight? So I hope they deliver on that front.
When you mentioned Manny and Floyd, and that's an example on the good and the bad, because, we would say, hey, they waited 6 years to make the fight. It was way too long. But they would say, well, Floyd made $275 million and Manny made 100 and whatever, 80 million, I think it was. Whatever they made, the fight generated over $600 million. I mean, so they're going to say, well, but I think that's an outlier. Those were two. But you look and you say, if people would follow what Manny Pacquiao did, he fought Marquez 4 times. He fought Barrera twice. Look at the people he fought. Look at the list of his opponents. Why is Manny Pacquiao popular? Duh! Look at who he fought.
Yeah, and one thing I like to think is that promoters like to cash in on the marketing prime and not the athletic prime, and those tables need to turn a little bit and even out, because by the time they build this journey of each fighter, by the time they become recognizable names, we have to sit through a lot, and the fans have to sit through a lot, and they win all these titles and become multi-division champ, which really doesn't mean anything at the end of the day when you look at the resume and how they got there. So more substance, more fire, less smoke.
Yeah, I understand, it's a business, and so everybody wants to make the most money. But I think what you do is, and I said this on a number of interviews recently, if you turn around and you say, okay, number one, we're going to make the fights you want to see. When we put a fight on pay-per-view, and we want to limit the number that go on pay-per-view, but when we do that, we're going to turn around and we're going to make very solid undercards. You're not going to have Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury and nothing else. We're going to give you 4 fights on that undercard or 3 fights on that undercard that are really entertaining, and maybe not the biggest names, but you're going to have guys, you know, when you watch these fights, you're going to go, wow. And you have to do that on a regular basis. You can't do it on one show and say, oh, it didn't work and we're done, because you have to commit to it. You have to convince the public, because the business side of the sport ruined the sport itself. They didn't do this for so many years, and it was neglected, and it got out of control. Now you got to bring it back, in my opinion, and say, we promise you we're going to do what you want, and we're going to deliver what you are expecting of us on a regular basis. And I think if you do that for a period of time, the public will finally catch on and will get back into the sport, and you'll grow a new generation of fans that you had lost.
It's, you know, it's very few and far between, Kevin, and I think you can provide more of a historical context, but just more recently, look at these undercards. They're so watered down. They're so, you know, very, very, you know, I go home with a bitter taste in my mouth, because I had to sit through 8 hours of very boring fights to get to the main event. We saw it with Wilder Fury. That was a very, very meager undercard. And, you know, going as much flack as Don King has gotten over the decades, he was famous for putting together great undercards. And
6 title fights on one card. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to go back to that era. You know, they've done it before. Look at the Mayweather-Canelo fight. The undercard was probably one of the best undercard co-feature fights you can ask for, with Lucas Matisse and Danny Garcia. So we need to see more of those fights down the line, where it's like these riveting co-features as well too.
Let's talk about some of the fighters themselves. And you had a chance before Tyson Fury fought Deontay Wilder to spend a day with him in Las Vegas at his camp. And, you know, I've had that same opportunity, and I know that you see things that you never expect you're going to see. You did a really good piece for the LA Times profiling Tyson Fury. Tell everybody a little bit of what it was like that maybe didn't get a chance to read your piece, what that was like, and you know, kind of what your thought was of Fury before and then after you spent that time with him.
That was a pretty cool trip. That was a pretty cool experience, pretty cool project, and the trip. As you've done the trip yourself many times, I did the day trip to Las Vegas that day. I had the first flight out of Burbank, last flight back in, and until the morning of the interview, I didn't know the environment of which I was going to interview Tyson Fury. This was a very different camp for him. The people around him were very uncertain how Tyson Fury would wake up every morning and feel. They were at the mercy of his up and down camp roller coaster. And I went to Las Vegas. I touched down, and I found out I'm interviewing him at his house after his run. So we had our photographers and videographers there. We had a nice setup at his backyard in his pool area, where, you know, we made the most of what we can get. They said 0 access to the gym. You're not seeing any sparring. You're not going to see him hit a bag. So it was going to be at his house, which is more of my style anyway. I like to get people outside of the gym where they're comfortable. You know, he could have said, interview me on top of the roof. I would have said, let's do it. So we had the camera set up and everything, and I was working with a team of videographers that don't have, that really weren't into the whole boxing world, so they didn't really know how the fighters really worked. So Tyson Fury finished his run, came in with his Speedos, towel hanging over his shoulder. He saw our camera set up. He's like, why are they doing the interview in the jacuzzi, or there's going to be no interview at all? In the back of my mind, I'm like, this is perfect. My bosses are going to love this. Tyson Fury in a jacuzzi, getting the photo spread, getting the video. And we had about a half-hour conversation in the jacuzzi. And you can imagine at that point, he's tapping out, because you can only stay in the jacuzzi for so long.
Right.
So we had a great conversation. I think one of the most riveting things that he told me, which became an in-the-moment piece, was that he told me he woke up that morning and he was depressed. And as we all know, with Tyson Fury's battle, and he's been such a champion for mental health awareness, but to have the fight of your life and to wake up down in the dumps and to be so open and truthfully and painfully honest, it was a reminder that, you know, people deal with demons in their life,
Right.
no matter how well or how successfully they've overcome it. And, you know, to see what he did afterwards made that story a little bit even more powerful for me, because it kind of shows that, you know, you can use an athlete no matter how far they fall, and still use them as a source of inspiration and admiration, and for you to become a better person as well too, and overcome anything.
What I thought was remarkable about his performance in that fight was, you looked at their first fight in 2018, and you know, a lot of people thought he won the fight. He performed, he boxed beautifully, and you said, hey, just make one small adjustment, don't get hit with that, you know, that big shot, and you're gonna run away with this. And yet he kept saying the entire camp, I'm coming forward, I'm gonna walk him down, I'm gonna knock him out. And we all laughed and thought, yeah, he's just saying that and he's not gonna do it. And then he did it. And I think that, you know, he set such a high bar. How do you top that? So now he's got to do it again. I'm going to be fascinated. What do you expect to see? Let's assume that they do fight in October. That's right now. The plan is October 3rd. With this pandemic, we never know when it would happen. But you know, if they go October 3rd, do you think Fury does the same thing, or do you see any changes there?
You know, this is one of those. This is going to be one of those series where 9 times out of 10, I think Tyson Fury is going to win. You know, it's as much as Deontay Wilder is exciting, he's a one-trick pony, and we've seen it time and time again. Where when you have a fighter of a different class, a different style, and you have someone who just goes for the bomb, usually the smarter fighter will win. And Fury proved that he has the chin, the heart to get up, and the fact that the time in between these fights, Fury got better. Wilder still maintained at his plateau while Fury still continued ascent. And Fury loves to mention that he beat the longest reigning heavyweight champion in Vladimir Klitschko. And I wouldn't be surprised if now Fury beats that record himself too. I really don't see anyone outclassing him at that size, that speed, that technique, and just prowess that he has in the ring. It's truly a unique blend for the heavyweight division. And I think it's the only person that can beat Tyson Fury is himself at this moment.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I think Wilder has maybe a little more chance to turn it around than you think, because of that incredible power he has. And I think if he, you know, he has to change a little bit fundamentally. I think he needs to work off a jab more, and a more traditional jab. And if he, you know, he's never going to outbox Tyson Fury. So let's, you know, no matter what he does, you know, he can get bring Eddie Futch back from the dead and have him for 6 months. It's not going to change, you know, who he is. But I think if he makes some slight adjustments, you know, he can bring it back in where he has a chance to land something. But, you know, I mostly agree with what you said. But what I want to see, though, is are we in a situation like we were when you looked at, you know, Joe Frazier gave Ali hell every time they fought. George Foreman just blew out Joe Frazier both times they fought. And then Ali dominates Foreman, you know, and then the Ken Norton thing in there, you know, the way they all mixed, you know, their styles were so different that they had a great series, but each individual guy. Do you think that we're in for that kind of thing, like, you know, Wilder versus Joshua, Fury versus Joshua, you know, and then maybe some of the up-and-coming heavyweights, you know, in there, like the guy that I really like, Daniel Dubois, you know, I think he's on the rise, and there are other guys. Do you think that we're on a verge of having that kind of thing, like we did in the 70s when you had, you know, Foreman and Ali and Frazier and, you know, later Larry Holmes and, you know, Ken Norton and those kind of guys?
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that Tyson Fury has to do right now is go through that gauntlet, go through that murderer's row, as they say, of opponents. There's no reason he should be fighting an Otto Wallin anymore, Tom Schwartz. Those guys are all those types of fighters. When you're a world champion, when you're at the elite level, there's no reason you should be fighting those kinds of fights anymore. So the heavyweight division, I put out kind of an unofficial poll the other day of who's the best Fab Five in boxing, and I had over 400 replies on Twitter. And, you know, 135, 147, heavyweight, those are the top 3 divisions right now. You know, pick your.
There's a lot of good light heavyweights and a lot of good super middleweights.
Yeah, and you know, I'm just going top 3, and you know, it's a pick your poison at that point. And that's what Tyson Fury has right now. He needs to go through that, and be active. There's no reason you need to be fighting twice a year. I want to see go back to the glory days where we see a little bit more activity. And Tyson Fury is that kind of fighter where, you know, idle time and twiddling thumbs is going to end up probably creating more trouble than peace for him. So you
Yeah.
know, we should see these fights. And you know, I have to give, when you mentioned super middleweight, we don't know what weight he truly is anymore, but Canelo Alvarez, we have to give him credit because every single fight he tries to be the best. He goes for the creme de la creme of opponents. You know, the pool of 5 to 7 fighters he has, let's pick your poison. Each one of them are going to be great, and he doesn't go for the 12th one. So I would love to see these champions take these kinds of challenges and define their legacies, because one quote that the gentleman you interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Mike Tyson, he told me in my conversation with him, is that you need to become the kind of fighter that you live for centuries. And
Right.
Mike Tyson is that kind of fighter, and Muhammad Ali is that kind of fighter. So who wants to be and take that throne, you know? And there's been, you know, the Mayweathers, the De La Hoyas, the Sugar Ray Leonards. That short list, who's going to be that fighter from this generation? And Tyson Fury has that possibility if he continues on this trend.
I think another guy who has that possibility is Terence Crawford, but I was kind of outraged at his comments to our friend Chris Mannix, where he basically said, if I have to fight in an empty arena, you have to pay me more than what I'm making now. And I'm like, are you nuts? And, you know, I want to preface this because some people may not understand my point here. I am in favor. I understand the risks the fighters take, and I am in favor of the fighters getting as much as they can. And I never had a problem with Floyd Mayweather making 100 million, 200 million, because he sold and he generated the money. But you know, when Terence Crawford fights and he gets 5 million a fight, the promoter's losing money because he's not selling tickets. He's not selling, unless he's in Omaha, and then he does. But he doesn't sell tickets. He doesn't sell pay-per-views. His pay-per-view against Amir Khan was embarrassingly bad. And this is a guy that might be the greatest fighter in the world. I think that A, it's very selfish what he said, but I think B, Manouk, and I want to get your take on this. It doesn't show any respect for the business, because he basically, what he's saying is, I don't care about the fans. I don't care about my legacy. I don't care about anything but how much money I make. And I guess in one way you can't blame him, but if you want to grow this, everybody has a role in growing this business, and he's certainly not helping grow the business with that kind of attitude.
Yeah, Terence Crawford, he's rough around the edges, as we all know. You know, he has his demeanor and personality, and he's made it clear that he's not going to change for anybody. You know, he's cut from a different cloth, and no matter how much marketing savvy that his agents and promoters teach him, he's going to continue on that one-track road that he's had his entire life. And unfortunately, when we're talking about legacy, Terence Crawford's legacy is at the mercy of his opponents right now. And for him, he does not have any leverage. He does not have he's not in the position to have the bargaining chips, and he kind of has to come, you know, he's always down a run in the ninth as far as negotiations go, because he doesn't have Top Rank does not have the promotional stable that other competitors do to move around pieces for him to go through one opponent after another. And Terence Crawford has to be okay with not being the winning the fight financially, but being close from a split standpoint. And you know, you're gonna have to take a risk on yourself at some point,
right?
And I think that's what Terence Crawford has to realize, because at the age of 32, he still has aspirations at 154, from what we understand. He needs to take a risk on himself and say, listen, I will do this for, you know, it might be a one step back financially for 3 steps forward down the line for him.
The thing that I think, you know, the point I would try to make, and if you're guaranteed 5 million and now you're saying I need to make more, the money isn't there. But I think if you say, hey, I'll take 3 million, I'll let them use that other 2 million to put a better undercard on, and then we go on pay-per-view, it'll sell more. You actually make more in the long run because you sell more, and you make yourself into an attraction that will last. Terence is a great fighter. There's no doubt. I had him number one for the longest period of time, and I only moved him to number two because I thought, as I thought about it, what Canelo Alvarez did moving up in those weights, I jumped Canelo ahead of him. But you could still make the argument that Crawford is the best in the world, no doubt. He is a phenomenal fighter, and he is worth a lot of money. I just think that this is a sport. You have to earn your money by not what you do in the ring so much, but how many butts you put in the seats and how many eyeballs you get on the TV screen. And that's where he comes up short. And I think he really needs to understand that a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of these promoters have been talking about these closed door events. And I find it hard to believe that promoters are going to pass up a gate and put the creme de la creme fighters in an empty arena and essentially become a laughingstock by saying you're fighting in an empty arena. The NBA could get away with that because they're paying salary to these players regardless. They need to get the product moving forward because they're bleeding money regardless. But a promoter can't willingly step to the table, say, I'm willing to bleed X amount of millions of dollars just to keep a fighter busy. Now, if ESPN came and said, hey, Bob Arum, we need some dates, we need viewers, put whoever you need to, if they're working with ESPN's budget at that point, if just to have live events for the sake of generating ad revenue, I could see closed door events, but on a smaller scale. We're not going to see I don't think we're going to see big time fights.
No. Well, think about this. Here's the thing. Let's use a fight that, has been agreed to now, Canelo Triple G3. So Canelo, his salary kind of goes up and down depending on certain parameters, but let's say roughly he's guaranteed $35 million for a fight. Gennady, he gets some of his in equity in the company and some in cash, but he's going to get around 12 to 15 million for a fight. So if we go on the high end, that's $50 million. Now, when they fought, their last gate, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was 27 million. If you're going to tell me that they're going to fight when we come out of this pandemic and you're going to eliminate that $27 million gate and say, we're going to go to zero, where does the money come from to pay $50 million? I just don't see where, how they get it back.
Kevin, get ready for the new boxing capital of the world, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that might be it.
I think boxing might be going into the different corners of the world that it hasn't experimented with in the past or in recent years per se. Boxing is as global of a sport as it gets next to soccer. So we might be seeing the sport headed towards some towns and cities we've never heard of. But in order to keep the action moving, that might happen. I wrote a story the other day. Fernando Beltran, the head of Xanfer Promotions in Mexico, according to the Mexico's health advisor, May 17, they're going to be opening up different parts of the country. And the headquarters for TV Azteca is one of those locations. And they want to get studio fights underway already. So, it's going to be, the sport's going to slowly materialize in different parts of the world. And at that point, we might see different players step to the scene again.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. I really appreciate your time, but I'm going to put you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you what I think might be a tough question. If there was one fighter out there today that you could watch and then never see boxing again, who would that be? I have my choice, and it may not be somebody that you would think. I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll give my answer.
Is this past or present?
Active fighter.
Oh, active fighter. Wow. I definitely have my past fighters. An active fighter.
You can throw it in there just for that, but give me your explanation when you choose your active fighter. Give me an explanation of why.
He's an active fighter, but he probably won't be for much longer. I have to go with Manny Pacquiao. He's a once in a generation, once in a lifetime kind of fighter. And for him to do what he's done for better parts of 3 decades, it's truly mesmerizing. Boxing's only 8 division champion. He's beating guys who are half his age. And it's a sight to see. It's a sight to behold. And I've had the privilege of covering his career from up close. I live 20 minutes away from Wildcard Gym. So, I like to visit my grandma in Hollywood. I'll drive by Wildcard every day just to see him in person and see what he does. And it's truly remarkable. And just when we talked about Murderers Row, just looking at Pacquiao's resume, it's mesmerizing. And you were there for so many of those big nights. And we're never going to get a fighter like him. It's never. So
let me tell you a story about Pacquiao, by the way. This is on his fight with Marquez. Back in the day, what they used to do is, this is the internet was, of course, around in 2004 when he fought Marquez the first time, but it was still, boxing promoters weren't used to it. So they used to let I was working for the Review Journal. The fight would be in Vegas. They'd let me go in the backs because deadlines on the newspaper on a Saturday night were so tight. So I'd go and interview the winner after the fight ended. So after that fight ends, it's in a draw. I ended up going into Manny's locker room. And before the fight, Manny spoke very little English. He was wearing a McDonald's coat. And I said, "You don't eat that garbage." I said, "There's no way." He goes, "Yes, I do." And he was arguing with me like, "I eat McDonald's." And I'm laughing. So now he comes out of the dressing room. And I was talking to Freddie Roach right outside the dressing room. And Manny comes walking out and he's limping. He had blisters on his feet. Something was wrong with his shoes and he was really limping. And he comes out and he's, wearing his McDonald's coat again. And as he walks by me, Freddie says, "Where are you going?" And Manny looks and he sees I'm standing there. And remember, this is a guy who's only been speaking English now for about a year at this point. He looks at me and goes, "I'm going to McDonald's." And I thought, this is this unbelievably shredded guy. And I just thought that, Manny, that personality that he has is so magnetic. And that was so funny.
Yeah, my favorite Pacquiao story is actually part of a story I ended up writing. As you can see, I'm not a person who likes to skip a burger as part of a diet. So last year, I had the honor of doing a story for Men's Health with training with Manny Pacquiao. So what I did, and I was a madman for thinking about this, how it would be even doable. I told Fred Sternberg, his publicist, and as well as Sean Gibbons, and we actually met later on.
I was at Manny's house that day.
Yeah. So earlier that morning, I went running with Manny Pacquiao in the Griffith Park Mountains. I've done that hike with my girlfriend hundreds of times before. I like to think I can, a 10-minute mile is, average for me. I said, I'm going to go try and see how long I could last with Manny Pacquiao and his 20-man entourage running up the mountains. And what I ended up was just a story of, not only what happened is that my car was parked there, and Sean's like, "Trust me, we'll have one of the guys drive your car up because there's no way you're going to be lasting with him. He's like, you'll be eating dust and dirt all the way in the back." So one of his Pacquiao's entourage people, they drove my car up, and I lasted for about 15 minutes before I was rethinking life decisions. But the essence of the story was just to know the person Manny Pacquiao was. And you go up there, there's like 200 of his fans just and while he's doing sit-ups, and for him to still resonate with his people and with his fans, to this day, it's truly a sight to see.
Well, that's obviously choosing Manny is a great choice. I mean, one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen. The guy I would say, if I can only watch one more fight that I would want to see right now is Naoya Inoue, the monster. I mean, what a guy. I mean, he is everything that I want to see in a fighter. I mean, he's tough. He showed that against Nonito Donaire. Got power. He's fast. I mean, all those things, and he's young, and that's what I like, and he's on the way up. And so Naoya Inoue is the guy for me. I want to see him. If he's my last fight, I'd be happy to watch Naoya Inoue. So that I don't know what you think of that choice, but to me, he is a special fighter.
Unfortunately, with coronavirus, he was supposed to fight this weekend in your back at the Mandalay Bay, make his not his U.S. debut, but his grand debut as a headliner. He has fought once before in the States, but he's definitely one of those fighters that truly the hardcore fans are really appreciate, but someone who sees him for the first time will really marvel at his skills. And I still get goosebumps on that fight he had with Donaire last time.
Right.
Woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning local time to watch that live. I'm like, I'm not missing this fight.
How could you miss that? No,
I'm not going to let Twitter spoil it.
I mean, he was a huge underdog. He fought an unbelievable fight in that bout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was remarkable. And Donaire is another one. He's another Filipino great fighter who has moved along those lower weights in flying colors, and he had his Hall of Fame career 3 years ago already set. And the fact that he's still performing at the peak of his powers, it's truly remarkable.
Well, my friend, this was great. I'm glad to be able to catch up with you and get a chance to chat and get your thoughts on what's going on in boxing. I look forward to the day when we're not doing it this way, but we see each other and sitting side by side at ringside. Manouk, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you too, Kevin. Thank you very much. This was really fun.
All the best, brother.